Okay, welcome to week 4, everyone. Hope your week is going well. I've opened up, a lot of you guys have already started the chat box, but it's popped up there so you guys can sign in. I can give you your points. So, again, I hope your week's going well. This is week 4. We are in module 2. So, week 4, if you look at your syllabus, you get a little breathing room this week. You don't have anything due on Sunday. You guys just finished up your informal assessment reports. Pretty much all those I've gotten scored and back to you with some feedback. Most of them look really good. You guys are on the right track. I do want to say one thing quickly before I forget. I'll get started talking and forget all about it. Had a couple questions pop up. Different ones emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm having trouble merging these documents, like maybe the lesson plan into the assessment report." They were having some challenges there. It's not a have-to deal that you have to submit all of them as one. It's very common for the students to submit like the assessment report and then turn around and upload the lesson plan as a second file. So that way, when you submit your assignment, it will show me all those files across the top. So don't stress a lot if you're having trouble getting those to merge or you have limited technology where you're at. I'll still take those. You can do the lesson plan separately. You can just upload it as a separate file and just submit it all as one if you have trouble merging. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there before I forget. Okay, so don't spend a lot of time on that trying to get it to merge if you have trouble. We're going to start talking about norm reference assessments, and this is the assessment that I mentioned to you that most everyone would need to try to work with a school psychologist or psychometrist because most of the norm reference assessments require extra credentialing or certification to be an evaluator. So this will give you some time to reach out and someone in your district, if you're in a smaller district, and contract those services out, you may start reaching out to that individual to see if you can work with them. Remember on this, on the norm reference, and I stated this early in the semester, I'm not asking you to go and administer the norm reference yourself because you don't have the credentials to do it on a majority of the norm reference tests. That's why it requires you to work with or partner with that school psych or the psychometrist. Okay, we had a lot of confusion on this one semester, and it got back around that we as instructors were asking you to do that, and I'm not because you don't have the certification to do it. Okay, now one thing maybe to ease a little bit of stress, I want to tell you up front. If you are in a district where you contract that service out, and that individual maybe only comes around once every month, 6 weeks, because they're servicing multiple schools, and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to be in a bind here. I have provided in the course shell a testing lab video. And I did this back, especially during COVID and in the summer courses when school wasn't in session. So basically, I did a reevaluation on a high school student, and I got permission to record it from his parents. It's given the WJ4 cognitive. Okay, we have the cognitive and the achievement. I videoed the cognitive because there's interaction, a lot of it between me and the student. The achievement side of that WJ4 is most of the subtests are timed, so there's very little action. It would not help for this class. So it's a video. It's probably 30, 35, 40 minutes long of myself administering that. You can watch that video, and then if you choose to use that, please send me an email, let me know, and I will send you the comprehensive report that goes along with that video that will have the data that you will need to pull in order to write your report. Okay, it's the full comprehensive report, but you can pull the data from that report to meet the requirements for this assignment. Okay. That video is found in the SPED 805 resources folder in the course shell. Okay. So just know if you are foresee a challenge being able to work with a qualified examiner in your district, you can use that video if needed. Just make sure you send me an email, let me know so I can send you the report. Okay? Any questions on that before I really get into norm reference assessment? Just kind of wanted to take care of that quickly at the beginning so I didn't forget. All right, I'm going to do a screen share. We're going to look at a slide deck, talking a little bit about the norm reference assessments. And didn't save the right one. Bear with me just a second here. Talking about some of the characteristics, slow pulling up. Talk a little bit about this characteristics of norm reference assessment. I'll go to a little setting. We share. What's popping up? You often hear the term standard reference, norm reference, which we're going down. Again, I apologize. My internet is slow tonight. Also, we talk about achievement tests, which are often referred to as state tests. And then another type of test that we often hear a lot about is the aptitude test. So that's not uncommon, the aptitude test for like when the military comes in and they do ASVAB testing. Wrong one. I'm having fits here tonight, guys. I don't know what's going on. Like my screen's doing about three things here at the same time. Okay. See if we can get it now. There we go. Hopefully we're in business now. Should pop up there on your end anytime. There we go. You should be able to see it now. It says chapter 5, norm reference. Everybody see it? Okay, we're good. Sorry about that. So basically, how are norm reference tests constructed to begin with? So basically, your testing companies that go in and they have developed these assessments. There's an item pool that's created. Norm reference, remember, it's comparing that student's scores to a large number of other students of same age, grade level. Also, the items on the norm reference test that we go and administer, like I'm going to use the WJ4 as an example. When I come in and start administering that, all the items are arranged sequence according to level of difficulty. So we'll start off with the very basic for that student, and then they work their way up as far as level of difficulty. Also, when they develop these, they field test them using a small sample just to make sure that everything is correct before they produce it. They will also have other professionals critique that and then make revisions and go back and field test again. So kind of gives you an idea how they develop them. What is a norm reference? It's when we go in and we compare the performance of one student with the average performance of other student who are that same grade and age. Okay. If I come in and test a kid and they're in third grade and it's the second month, when I go in and score them, it's all scored with a large group of students of the same age and grade. Also, the norm group is very diverse group of students as far as their cultural differences, any type of disabilities, or linguistic differences. It sets averages for that assessment. So a lot of times if I'm given that in my report, and if you guys end up using that video and I send you that report, you'll see it in the scoring. It's going to show how the student scored according to his or her age equivalency, also to their grade equivalency. And then there's going to be a category out there that shows predicted. And that's basically what it's predicting that that student is going to score based on their age and grade level, and then also based on, especially if I give the cognitive, their general intellectual ability. So it provides a lot of data on that. Okay. Another thing is we talk about interpolating data. So basically the test developers, when they develop these, they come up with what they consider to be average expected scores. And those scores are going to be written in decimal form. A lot of them you're going to see when we present those scores. Again, I talk about age equivalency, grade equivalency. It's going to be like grade equivalency is 3.2, third grade, second month. Age equivalency is 8 years, fourth month, 8.4. Okay, so you'll see those scores written in decimal form. Standard scores are going to be written in just uh, often two-digit numbers, like their standard score is 68 or 52. Okay. Also in there, it can divide their scores up by chronological age group to kind of give you an idea there. It may show that student's age in years, months, and days. It will always show that when we do our testing in the report. It will show that the student on the day I tested him was 10 years, 4 months, and 23 days old. Okay, so it's very important to keep track of that when we go and do their overall scoring. There are specific steps in giving norm reference tests as far as how we administer them. And so if I come in as an evaluator, it's very important that I follow the protocols exactly. As an evaluator, I cannot come in and make adjustments as I go on that test. I need to really make sure that I follow that consistently to make sure that we get good, valid results because there's a lot riding on these scores, and mainly the outcome is determining the student's placement. Okay, so it's very important. So one thing we want to do is come in and get familiar with the student. Okay, I want to come in and try to build some rapport with them, just engage in conversation. If I don't do that and come in and I'm real cold and all that, we're already starting off on the wrong foot. Okay. It's not going to get a good, solid test score. Explain what we're going to do as far as a little bit about the test, a little brief introduction, and then try to present directions and the testing environment, just kind of approach it in a calm, soothing manner. Talked about calculating chronological age. You'll always see this at the top of those reports when we prepare them. You can kind of see how you can hand calculate it. Software will do this, so you really don't have to, but it gives you an idea. So we show the test date. Test date was in, let's say, fourth month, second day of 2003. And then we come down here and we put their birth date. They were born in 1994, the 10 month, eighth day. And then we literally start borrowing years. When we take it over to months, we convert it into 12. We borrow from that, carry it over. And so you can kind of see the day that they were tested, their chronological age was 8 years old, 6 months. We round up. Basically, they were 8 years old, 5 months, 24 days. Okay. So I always tell parents when we explain these test results, you can see where your child was the day I tested him. And that's a good marking point when I start presenting scores. It's kind of a good way to gauge whether he scored above or below his chronological age or her chronological age. Okay, raw score. That's the first score we get when we test. So basically, you're taking the total number problems there were. Let's say there's 30 problems. He got 24 or she got 24 correct. So the raw score is 24, 24 out of 30. Pretty easy. Okay. So basically, it's your number of items that a student answers correctly. It's a raw score. Basals and ceilings. Anybody heard of basal and ceiling before? Have a little bit of an idea? Okay. So basal is where the basically we're establishing the starting point or the base. It's a level at which student could correctly answer all easier items. Now we go up and we hit what we call the ceiling. And depending on the subtest, I'm going to again use the WJ4 as an example. Some of the subtests will vary. The ceiling might be 5, the ceiling might be 6. It depends. And so basically, the ceiling is when they miss 5. If the ceiling's 5, they miss 5 problems consecutively. Once they miss that fifth one consecutively, they've hit the ceiling. I stop the test. We don't go any further. If the ceiling is 6, they miss 6 consecutive problems. They got them incorrect. I stop the test. Now, one thing I will tell you is if we come in and the student's a little bit older and test, I have to follow the protocol, the manual. And if there are, let's just say 70 problems on the subtest, Shannon, it's a math subtest. Okay. There's 70 problems. And for Johnny's age, Johnny is 14 years old. It's going to tell me I need to start Johnny off on problem 35 based on his age. I will direct him to start on problem 35 and work forward. When I score that, problem 1 through 34 is counted correctly, even though he didn't work them. Okay. This could happen. I start him on 35, 1 through 34 is correct. He starts on 35, the basal's 5, his first 5 problems, he gets incorrect, we hit the ceiling, we're done. That could happen. Okay. So, depending on their age, we start them at different places on the test. Okay. So, not uncommon. That's part of it. So, that gives you an idea about basals and ceilings. So, here's an example. Starting point can be given as age or grade. So, if the student is 6 years, 4 months, we'll start with item number 10. If the student is 8th grade, 3rd month, I'll start them with item number 50. Just like the example I gave you, depending on their age or grade, we start them off at a certain point on the test. It might not be problem 1. Okay, we move them up to a certain problem. Anything that they skipped when I score it is counted correct. Okay. Again, here's the note, which I just told you. When you calculate raw score, all items that appear before the established basal are counted as correct. Okay. Ceilings, talked a bit about that. Protocols. You hear the term protocol. Basically, protocol is forms that are used when we administer those tests. It's what we use to score the student on. So if you observe um, your psychometrist or school psych, if you're observing them, I think Shannon got to see some of that this week, perhaps, and then maybe even today, based on our conversation. That examiner, the psychologist, has a protocol he or she is using to go through there and document when they're scoring. I might have to track a student's reading fluency, and I'm making document notes on words they mispronounced, words they might have omitted. So I'm tracking that and I'm scoring it. That's what I use as an examiner as a protocol. When we score them, we use ones and zeros. Ones mean it's correct. 0 means it's incorrect. Okay, it's how we score them on those protocols. Also, I talked about making sure we follow the manual specific guidelines. We have to make sure, double check to make sure what that basal and ceiling is based on the student's age or grade. Okay, we don't want to make a mistake on that either because it will skew our results. So we have to really pay attention to that. Okay, norm reference. I mentioned Shannon's gotten to observe some of that. So getting the best results, depending on the student's age, we may need to break this up into a few sessions. Okay. Especially the younger the student is, I really like to do that because if you don't, that is a long time for those little guys to sit in there and work through that. It will wear them out, and you don't, to me, in my opinion, you don't get a good balanced reading on them. In all fairness to the student, need to break that up. They get antsy, their attention span goes away, and they get tired because it will wear them out. Getting the best results, okay? trying to establish that rapport. I mentioned that. If at all possible, if you can do some observations, like classroom, or at least have some observation data, try to make the student feel at ease. We have to make sure that we reinforce their attempts and efforts, not the correct responses. Just have to kind of reinforce their effort. Hey, you're working really hard for me. I appreciate that, but not their response. Okay. Sometimes, depending on the student and maybe their suspected disability, as an examiner, we may have to have some kind of a tangible reinforcement at the completion of that testing session to kind of keep that student motivated to keep working. Okay. I've seen different examiners that I've worked with. They may bring in some kind of a little treat for them, give them a break and some things like that, gives them something to work towards, especially the little guys. Okay. Okay. Another thing, we'll spend a lot of time on this, is making sure when we look at norm reference testing that we reduce bias and take different steps for that. Um, Making sure that we have the proper um, aids or assistance as far as technology for the student as well. We don't want to limit the student on their responses, and making sure that they have the ability to respond, and also being fair to that student, and that we explain all the instructions in a familiar, easy to understand fashion. Okay. So anything we can do to reduce bias, we need to do that. Okay, looking at scores, how do we score norm reference? What does that look like? I mentioned raw scores. Okay. You don't really maybe see the um, raw score on the report, but the examiner does. We're looking at those raw scores. The examiner, Shannon, I don't know if you got to see your individual you worked with actually go in and input that into the software, and how that we transfer that and how that works. We take raw data, we put it into the scoring software. Okay. So on the end, when you see the report, you don't really see the raw data. You're just seeing all the standard scores and how it's been normed. Okay, so um, different ways that it is presented. These are all the different types of scores that you may see in formalized assessment reports. Okay, I know this is probably a lot, but it's good to kind of have a basic understanding. So when you're sitting in the MEEGS meeting and they come in to explain the results, you're going to hear all these different terms. You go, I remember hearing a little bit about that class. So different types of standard scores and ways to score. We have a standard score in which, if we always say the average is 100, that's right in the middle. If they're in the range, one standard deviation above or one below, that's in the average range. We also have a T score. You might have heard this somewhat. T scores and Z scores. A lot of times, if you look at star reading and math reports, it will show that T score. That's a very common term. If your school uses star, you'll see that on there. So basically, on a T score, your average score is 50. Okay, on a when we look at a T score, it's just a different way of scoring the students. Standard deviation is 10. Okay. A Z-score basically will show that student standing in standard deviation units. So it's a different way to show how they are performing. In the testing side with us, as an examiner coming in, a lot of times we don't show the T-score and Z-score a lot. We mainly stick to standard scores, and percentile rank are the more common ones that we look at, okay? Stay nine score, you will see those on our reports. It's not often discussed a lot, but it is another way to present. And on Stay nine score, we divide the distribution into 9 segments, and we show an average of 5 and a standard deviation of 2. Okay, so again, these are different ways, are not as popular in reporting, but I wanted to make you aware of it. Scaled score, again, Similar to Stanine, we divide the distribution into 19 segments with a standard deviation of 3. The next 3 are common, percentile rank. Okay, very common term that you're going to see. How student performed in relationship to students in the norm sample of the same age or grade. Percentile rank was 79%. That tells us that Susie scored equal to or better than 79% students. Okay. Age equivalent shows the student in the norm sample who on average got the same score. So if they're their age equivalency on the score, Shannon, they might have been, or Carrie, the day I tested them, they might have been 14 years, 2 months, but on this particular math subtest, they may be scored, their age equivalent was 8 years, 5 months. That tells you they are well below level, right? If you're looking at age equivalency. Same thing on grade equivalency. The same student that's 14 years old might be in ninth grade, first month of school. And on that same test, if I look at his grade equivalent, it might have been um, third grade, fourth month. Again, well below, right? That's an easy way to kind of compare. Okay. For most of you on norm reference testing and sitting in those meetings, you're going to see standard score, very common, percentile rank, age equivalent, grade equivalent. Those are the 4 more popular terms that you guys will see moving forward, and you will hear that term when you're sitting on testing meetings. Group testing. When we do norm testing for placement, we don't do group. Okay, but when we look at formalized testing in groups, we often, that's state test, right? Achievement testing, we give it to our third grade class, and there's 25 kids in there, right? Group testing, standardized test. Okay, often referred to as high stakes test. Okay, states do it every spring, right? So, things to consider: tests should be logical and serve the purpose in which they are intended. We don't just want to go and just give them for the sake of giving them. We want to make sure that or understand that there is no test out there that has the capability of answering all achievement questions. Okay. There are some core principles for testing. It'll go over it here. It's a way that holds schools accountable. That's what assessments, a lot of times, the state assessments are for. Also, it shows how students uh, measure up to other students within the state or across the nation on some of the same content. A lot of times, high quality decision making determines how students participate. Public reporting includes assessment results of all students. Most every state now has a school report card, right? You guys doing that in Kansas and other states out there? You have your school district report card, right? A lot of it has testing data in it. Accountability determinations are affected in the same way by all students, and then also it's used to provide continuous improvement, monitoring to ensure quality within your school system. Okay, we're looking at high test or high stakes testing, and then when we're dealing with special ed students. Okay, so it's used to determine if programs are effective. Students, remember, can have accommodations. It could be changes in the format, response mode, their setting. Okay, we have to a lot of times do those students in a separate setting, and then we're providing those accommodations. It just depends on what's written in on their IEP. Okay. We can't alter what that test measures, but we can provide those accommodations um, for those kiddos. Okay. Same thing with 504. It allows for some accommodations as well. Here's one thing to know if you're not aware of it, especially if you're new in special education for working in school districts. Um, Students who can't do the testing, you have to have some kind of an alternate assessment. There is a cap on the number of students who may take alternate assessments. Okay, each district has a cap, so 1% cap. Alternate assessments may include portfolio, performance-based, authentic, and observations. Okay, so every state's a little bit different on that, but just know there are some alternative assessments for students with special needs, and that there is a testing cap. So a lot of times your district testing coordinator, your special ed director work closely on that to make sure that you don't exceed that cap within your district. Here are a few things. I'm not going to really go over all this in detail. You can go back and look at it as a reference. There are a lot of issues related to research when you look at high stakes testing, and there are some bullet points here to consider. Testing's a big thing, especially on standardized tests. There's always a big debate over that. Looking at high stakes tests, uh, as far as like state testing compared to individual formalized tests that we come in and administer in a one-on-one setting. Okay, a little bit different type of scenario there. So I would encourage you to go back and look at that just to kind of get some ideas. Okay, there are like 6 principles that are looked at as far as the universal design when it comes up to assessment. So the first principle is making sure equitable use. That the design of the assessment is useful for people with diverse abilities. And so these 6 principles are the main focus for assessments that are used, like the WJ4. I think Shannon used the, would you tell me, KTEA assessment? Okay, so there's multiple formalized assessments out there that all are focused on these 6 principles. So the first one, make sure it's equitable use. The second principle, flexibility, accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. So any of these testing kits that we have are good to serve or assess a wide range of individuals, ages, and ability levels. The third principle is it's simple and intuitive to use. It's the use of design. It's easy to understand, regardless of the user's experience, their knowledge, or their current concentration level. The fourth principle is perceptible information. We want to make sure it communicates the necessary information, okay, to get the end result that will display that individual's needs. The fifth principle is tolerance of error. We will make sure that the design of the assessment minimizes any adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. The sixth principle is low physical effort. Okay, it does not take a lot to use these and to be efficient and comfortable using those. And then the last one is size and space. Appropriate size and space is provided in order to provide the assessments. So we just want to make sure that all those principles are followed when it comes to assessment. That is the last slide. I just kind of wanted to share with you just kind of an overview of norm reference assessments, what's looked at. Again, some of the terminology that's used, like the standard score, grade equivalency, age equivalency, percentile rank. Those will be 4 terms that you guys will hear a lot, especially in your meeting when you see those reports and they're presented. Okay. Any questions on that? I know that's a lot of information. We will kind of brush up on this again next week and review it as we start talking more about that assessment report. I would encourage you guys this week, if you have not already started seeking out that individual to help you or to work with you on this, as far as sharing some results with you, or even allowing you to observe them administering that you go ahead and start on that, because time flies. You know that we get busy, and next thing you know, hey, this assignment's due. Remember, if you're in a district that is smaller and you guys contract those services out and you need to use that testing lab video, it is there for you. Okay. But just remember, send me an email, let me know so I can get you the comprehensive report that has all the data. Okay. Any question over that? No, it's a lot in a short amount of time.
I had a question. You
Sure.
talked about the raw data
Yeah.
and like I didn't get to actually physically see my school psych like put it into it, but she gave me like the paper, all of this
The
like
protocol. Yeah.
the results were. Yeah. So do we need to have that raw data?
No,
No, not for our report.
not for your report. You don't. Mm-mm.
Okay. We're just gonna look at like that paperwork.
The paperwork, the formalized, like comprehensive report or the
Yep.
formalized report that they provided. Yes, you're going to be looking at that age equivalency data, your grade equivalency, your standard scores, and your percentile rank. Okay.
Yeah, it has a poor
Yeah.
composite score and
Excuse me.
that like poor composite score
Yeah.
or yeah.
So, like on
Okay.
the standard score, I'll just tell you, when we're looking at those things about as an evaluator side, especially, I mentioned WJ4 a lot. That's kind of my go-to. We all have kind of our preference. But when we start looking at those standard scores and they're down 70 or below, I mean, that's red flags popping up everywhere. I mean, we've got some serious deficiencies there. Even if it's in the mid to upper 70s, that's on that bottom end of that low average to where hey, again, warning signs are going off. So, yeah, definitely. Okay. Any other questions? No? Clear as mud, huh?
So we have no assignment due this
You have
week,
no
just
assignment
meetings.
this Sunday. The norm reference assignment will be due on November the 17th, which is
Okay.
not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. Okay.
Okay.
We've got
All right.
a little bit of a kind of some breathing room, a little bit of a break here. Yep. Okay. Give you plenty of time. Like I said, um, time to communicate with that evaluator in your district. If not, you can use that video. So it gives you some time to kind of work with them and then start putting that paper together. Okay. Now,
I
one,
have I have a question.
okay.
So the school psych in our building, she provide me with the information, but she doesn't does the test herself. She has someone that does the testing for her. Do you want me to observe that person performing the test for the student?
If you can, I always say it's great if they will allow you to observe them just administering that assessment so you can kind of see how that process works. I always tell a lot of students when we're doing this 805 class, it's really great if you can because a lot of times you'll never know how that is, and you often wonder how does that process work? And then you see these individuals coming into a MEGS meeting, and you just know they're the testing lady or the testing guy. That's what they're referred to, right? And you got this strange person coming in that you never see maybe a few times a year, and they're coming in with a report that's 20 plus pages long, and they start, spewing off all this statistical information. You're like, how do they do this? How do they come up with it? So if you have the ability to just observe and see how part of that is administered and how that process works, I would encourage you to do it if you can. It's not,
I have another question. So I pick a younger student, but then I was asked by the school psychology because we're going to be testing, which is going to test a student that is primary language is Spanish, not English. So my question is, can I still change the student? She wants me to help with the translation. That way I can observe the whole testing
sure.
process and be part of it. Do you
Yeah,
think that's a better idea?
I do. Yeah, because you're going to be right in it. I mean, you're going to be part of it.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think it would be a better experience for you personally. I mean, based on what you're saying, if you've been asked to interpret that, you're going to be right in that session so you can kind of observe and then you can work with the psychologist and have her share some of that data if she's willing to do that to help you for this assignment for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let's see, anyone has any other questions. I'm gonna let you go so you guys can check out the news and see the outcome of the elections going on. That'll be a all night deal, I bet. So, all right. Hey, if you guys have any questions, you think of anything after tonight, please email me pertaining to this assignment. If not, I'll plan on seeing you back here next Wednesday, or I'm sorry, next Tuesday, and we'll kind of go over and briefly review on norm reference. I will tell you next week is kind of that tipping point where we're going to actually be talking about the next assignment. It's almost that point where we're like starting to do two at the same time. Okay, so we're getting to that point. I told you I'd give you a heads up when we hit it. Next week will be it. I'll touch up on the norm reference and go ahead and start on the CBM and actually encourage you to go ahead and maybe start um, administering the CBM probe before you submit this norm reference. Okay, so we're at that point. That's the week where we literally are almost doing two at the same time, but it'll just be for that 1 week. Okay.
I have a question about that
Yeah.
just ahead of time.
Yeah.
Um, so for CBMs, like do you want three separate CBMs, or like I have a student that is coming up for his IEP, and I take three of those and average them together.
Mhm. Yeah. So you don't have to, yeah, you can do that either way. Exactly.
So three different ones because it's like a paragraph corrections because he struggles with
Exactly. Now you're
that.
going to
And so,
administer that multiple times because we're going to, and I will talk about next week, but this will kind of see why I'm starting that far out. The goal is to have 5 to 6 data points in your report. That means you need to give that probe 5 to 6
okay.
times. Okay.
Okay,
That
perfect.
data
Okay.
point. Okay.
Okay.
So that's why I always start that before we're even out of the norm reference because you're going to need to administer it 5 to 6 times. That's our goal, 5 to 6 data points.
Okay. So like I already progress monitored him in October, and had several from that. Can I use some of those
You
with the new
can.
ones so
You
that I have
can.
like that many? Okay.
That's right. You sure can.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So I'll introduce that next week, the second half of class. I'll talk about the data points. I'll talk about a baseline or aim line and an intervention line when we go to chart that and graph it. So I'll introduce that next week. Okay. All right. Unless there's any other questions, you guys, we'll stop for now and hope you guys have a good rest of the week. Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
All right.
Bye bye.